So, how are you guys? You guys have a bloodline of some of the famous musicians in history, and you've toured with other famous names in music. So, who influences you aside from them?
Well, I'm Malcolm, so I'm Jack Bruce's son. So obviously my dad had a huge influence on me as I was growing up, but I love all kinds of music, not just the blues rock rocking that he's best known for, and he was similar to that too. So I kind of grew up around him, listening to all kinds of music, from classical music to jazz to world music, all kinds of things. And I love Stravinsky, I love Jeff Buckley, all kinds of stuff really. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who's a Pakistani qawwali musician. So, my interests are diverse, really.
Yeah, sorry. When you ever go on stage, do you ever feel any pressure to live up to who's come before you?
In this particular context, doing the music of Cream, not really, because the music itself, we don't see ourselves as a tribute band. We are taking the spirit of the music, and it's all based on improvisation. So, the original band were incredible and unsurpassable, really. So we're not trying to be them. We're trying to take that spirit, which is improvising within a framework, and that's what they did. So if you listen to the original Cream, every night they played, it was different. It came out differently. And that's the wonderful thing about this music. It's very spontaneous, and it's a collective experience with us on stage as well as everybody in the audience. So it's a very wide open prospect, and so yes, I don't think we feel pressure, but there's external pressures. Can he hit that note as well as his dad, or things like that? Can he play as fast as all those kinds of things? But we don't really worry about that kind of stuff. We're doing it to honour the tradition and honour the music and honour our lineage.
Which is how it should be.
Absolutely.
Right, so how is touring nowadays different from when you first started out in the industry?
Wow. Well, I mean, it's oversaturated, so it's very competitive, but at the same time, so you kind of have to build it up in stages. I think from the outside, people might think, they're making, 6 million quid a night, and being sort of carried to and from the stage, and, all of that kind of stuff. But it's not really like that. It's much more you have the opportunity to be a working musician and have a tight crew with you. So we're normally traveling with 7 or 8 people on the road, including a front of house sound guy, a lighting visual director, a tour manager, etc. And so we're working musicians, and I think that's the way it should be. Because it keeps you humble. It's hard work being on the road. You're traveling all the time, which is exhausting. So you kind of, I think back in the day, they all learned the hard way. They all sort of sat around maybe doing certain substances and living a certain kind of lifestyle. And, for me, I don't do that. I meditate, do yoga, and try and keep myself together in a certain way. I'm a vegan. I eat well. I don't go down the McDonald's, route. And so I think it's a discipline. I think it, really has to be a kind of discipline to keep yourself together so that you can actually give what you're the best you can in terms of the performance. So, that's the way I see it, really.
Healthy living is definitely the way to go nowadays.
Absolutely.
Right, so obviously when you started out, music was kind of like one way. Now it's kind of like, I'll say mixed. There's a mixture because there's a lot more than it used to be. So do you think music has changed for the better or for the worse since you first started out?
It goes both ways. There's some incredible music out there, but the industry tends not to get behind innovation and musicianship. It gets behind, artists that have a big following on Spotify or Instagram or whatever. It's a youth-based culture, which I think is unrealistic as we move forward. People that actually buy tickets and buying music are not necessarily 14-year-olds, you know. So, I mean, I think it's got worse in some ways. The things that are promoted are kind of more and more generic, including a lot of the top artists. And that doesn't mean they're not talented. And then the impact on the actual artists themselves, the pressure to conform to that genericism. You know, there are some of the, you know, 2 or 3 current biggest artists in the world are actually really talented. I won't mention names, but there's one guy in particular, British artist, who's probably the biggest star in the world, and he's incredibly talented songwriter and all of that. But you just watch that pressure to dumb it down to a certain kind of you know, expression so that they can make money. And I think that that's a shame. I think there was an innocence in past times in the music business where it was about the music. It was about the expression. It was about really expressing something with gravity and meaning. And I think we're losing sight of that at the moment. But at the same time, you know, us humans are resilient, and I think that, you know, we are, even if we're not aware of it, we sometimes imagine, you know, oh, there's something missing there, you know, why don't I feel that satisfied? And I think a lot of people are feeling that, and so perhaps and hopefully people will start searching out things of value rather than just the current fashion and the superficial nature of the way it is right now.
I mean, this might surprise you, but I'm in my mid-30s and I would rather listen to sort of like 60s, 70s and 80s and 90s over a majority of everything that's released today.
Yes. I think that's, you know, I think that might be a fairly common thing. And you know, some of it is to do with production. You know, though the eras you mentioned are a lot of it was recorded, things were recorded in an analog fashion. You know, and now we've moved over pretty much to digital. There are certain frequencies even that are missing, and so there's a brittleness to the music. There's all the incredible positives about editing and you know, sound design and sonics that you couldn't have with analog. But when you listen to those old records, actually, funnily enough, I went and saw Tarantino's new movie.
Once Upon a Time in America. Oh yeah, Hollywood.
In Hollywood,
yeah.
And you know, I need to go and see it again because it's very dense with references and all that stuff. But one of the things that stayed with me was the soundtrack, and it was just beautiful. Like the depth to those recordings around that. You know, obviously he's referencing 1968 and around that time, but some of those recordings are incredible, and you can just hear every nuance and every detail. It's almost as if you're in the room with the musicians, and you know that sense of space and depth can be missing in our modern recording techniques. So, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity for people to open up, not just about music, you know, but just, you know, whether it's a conspiracy or whether it's just a self-perpetuating thing. We're moving into a time where people are very asleep to the possibilities, to the diversity, and you know, we're all kind of focused on certain things and very narrow things. And I think, you know, music as an expression of life is vast and infinite. You know, the possibilities, instead of it always being the same. We could blame radio programming and, you know, radio formatting, you know, and all of that stuff, which of course did start in the 50s and 60s. But you know, it's complicated. But I do think people are yearning for something with greater meaning in their lives, rather than just going to work and making money and you know, struggling even when they're doing that. So, you know, this sense of balance, I think our world desperately needs to find that, not just in music, but in all facets of life.
But as always, it needs to be a case of people need to want to find it.
Well, they also need to realise that there is more than they are currently experiencing. And, you know, I mean, it's almost about consciousness. It's about, you know, how our culture functions, you know. I mean, that's one of the things I am discovering with meditation, you know, just to settle the mind and that sense of expansion and possibility and joy and bliss in each moment. And our culture kind of restricts that. You know, you've got to watch TV, or you've got to do this, or you've got to do that, and you've got to have this material thing, consumerism as a construct. And there's nothing wrong with all those things, but as long as they're not controlling somebody. If there's some things that you're just choosing freely with your own awareness, that's another thing. But we do live in interesting times in that regard. I think we're about to sort of we need a revolution, not necessarily a political revolution, that's a whole other thing, but just a spiritual, a personal awareness revolution.
Indeed, yeah, definitely. So obviously this is the 50th anniversary tour of Cream, as we know. So
Yeah.
What exactly can fans expect on this tour? Could they expect maybe a surprise or two? Like for instance, Taylor Swift would bring out a special guest. So can they expect anything like that?
Oh, well, we thought about Taylor, but then we thought, nah, we didn't want to spend like our next 7 years' budget on one appearance. But no, she's great. But no, not Taylor Swift, unfortunately, not for this tour. What people can expect is about 2.5 hours worth of music, all the songs that Cream are well known for, like Sunshine of Your Love, White Room, Crossroads, Badge, some blues standards that they played themselves, and also sort of multimedia aspect. We've got video footage, still photography, all of those kinds of things, and we tell a few stories along the way about growing up with our dads and our uncle, and a few stories about Cream when they were around, and some anecdotes. And we probably will have a couple of special guests along the way, which we will announce. But really, the thing about Cream is it's trio music, and there's something very special about having 3 people on stage. The power rock trio concept is very special. It has an energy to it that if you start introducing other people, it doesn't have that same sense of possibility in space sonically, and the interaction between 3 musicians is a very special thing. So we try to, as much as possible, keep to what the original guys did in that regard, because that's how it works best.
It definitely does. Will there be a live DVD version to go with it, seeing as it is the 50th anniversary tour, and not many bands that are ongoing can say they've been together 50 years?
Well, we're obviously not the original guys, but yes, I think we would love to do something, get a DVD out at some point of a live show. We'll film 2 or 3 shows and get the best of that. Yeah. But, it's a delicate thing. I don't think any of us want to, overreach. But, we're all doing our own music. I'm writing an opera and releasing an EP later this year, doing my own. I'm a writer, so this is really just a lovely thing to do, to get exposure and to honor the tradition that we're definitely a part of. But we don't want to suddenly pretend that we are the original guys. We're not dressing up like them and playing it note for note and all of that kind of stuff. We're not a tribute band. We are just playing the music, and the music involves improvising pretty much. The songs are great, amazing songs, but it's almost secondary to just playing. And that's kind of what happened with the original band. They were kind of trying to write pop songs, and some of them are incredible in terms of radio hits. But when they actually got out and started playing, the story goes that, the audience is just literally, especially in America and the kind of burgeoning hippie movement, the audiences started shouting out, hey, just play. That's what they wanted to hear. They wanted to just hear them jam. And so we understand that intimately, because that's what we grew up doing with those guys. I sat around in our house with my dad, and he'd get on the Hammond organ, and I'd get on the piano, and we'd improvise, or other instrument combinations or whatever. And that was our relationship. Our relationship was based on our shared love of music. And, so that's what, that's the ethic that I feel, and I think all 3 of us feel strongly about moving forward. There are some incredible things like when in 2004 Cream got back together. It was a year after my dad had a liver transplant, and it was very touch and go whether he would survive. And so I think the 3 of them decided we better do this. If we're going to get back together, we should do it now, because one of us might not be around. And my dad lived 11 years after that, which was great. But he his health was up and down from that point on. But but at that point they did produce an incredible DVD and all of those kinds of things. So I don't think we want to supersede any of that out of respect for it. It's really just a kind of, for me, it's a couple of years of taking this around the world, and I think we do a pretty good job of honouring it, but not superseding it in any way, shape or form. As you
always want to. Right.
Yeah.
Do you and the guys ever huddle together around the table and think, shall we just stop because we've just had enough?
Well, I mean, as I just said, I'm actively pursuing my own music, and because it's an industry, because it's a business, you sometimes do things along the way that help you in that process. So, I'm not, my dad had an almost 60-year career in the music industry and released countless solo records and collaborated with all kinds of people, from Ringo Starr's All-Star Band to classic, Stravinsky's Soldier's Tale, etc., etc. He did all kinds of different things, and Cream was a 2.5-year period of that, almost 60 years of being an active musician. So even for him, I think it was an incredible achievement in his early 20s, like all of them, but then he went on to do so many different things, the same as Eric and Ginger. I mean, all three of them have had an unbelievable impact on popular music. And, Ginger, I mean, going to, I think setting up the very first recording studio in Nigeria and working with people like Fela Kuti, before anybody had even coined the term world music, Ginger was out there collaborating with people from different cultures. And, Eric's love of the blues and, working with B.B. King and all kinds of things, as well as obviously being a pop star in the 80s and the 90s. So Eric's had a stellar career. My dad followed his own path too. He did incredible things. So yes, I mean, as I say, I don't think it's a question of us huddling around. I mean, the other two will make their own choices, but I definitely am pursuing my own music in terms of my own voice as a composer. Yeah. And that to me is the most important thing. But, what an incredible opportunity to get out there and play this incredible body of work with Kofi Baker, who is Ginger's son, and Will Johns, who is Eric Clapton's nephew. And they're both just wonderful musicians, two of the best musicians I've ever played with. So it's great fun. But no, nothing lasts forever, apparently. So sometimes it's good to, have a window of opportunity and then move forward into the light.
Yeah. It's quite funny you bring up opera, because that was what my next question was sort of going into. As obviously there's a music industry, there's a movie industry, as we all know, and movies are getting, I feel, more popular than ever. So if you could, say, make a song for a movie or have a contribution to a film's soundtrack, would that be something you'd be interested in?
Very much so. I mean, I've actually found that quite difficult to break into. It's a little sort of mafiosi kind of thing. It's quite tight-knit and closed. But I am actually talking to a couple of production companies about doing that, submitting music for them to pitch for TV and film. And I've worked in the past. One of the first things I did professionally was work with two guys from a band called Soft Machine. Oh, yeah. A guy called Carl Jenkins, who is now Sir Carl Jenkins, and a guy called Mike Ratledge. And we'd go down to a studio. I'd go down to a studio called Angel Studios in London and play on adverts. So I was like 16, 17 when I first started doing that. And subsequent to that, I've actually produced music for a couple of adverts, and I did something for the BBC as well, some credit music for end theme credit music for a documentary. So, I've dipped my toe in that area.
Yep.
But it is definitely hard to break into. And also, you define yourself by what you do. So I've always been a little bit reticent to go too far into that thing, because there's a set of rules it goes with. It's like you can't just do what you want. There's a this is the pitch, this is what we require. We want the little bell to go ding, ding, ding at that point. And, I mean, some people are really good at that. I'm quite good at it, but I'm not sure I'd like to necessarily spend all my time doing that.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of limiting a little bit. Although occasionally I hear film music where I think, wow, that person was given carte blanche to really be creative and came up with something awesome and amazing. And then other times I think, well, it could just be a bunch of samples on a computer that somebody bunged together in 5 minutes, and or even just sort of pressed a button, and so I mean, it's an interesting one. I think if you can find, I'd love to do film music if I could find an opportunity to do something that was truly creative, that ran alongside a truly creative piece of filmmaking.
I'd recommend trying to get in with Chris Nolan then, because a lot of his movies have been revolutionary, to say the least.
Yes. Well, if you've got his number or his email, bung it over.
I'm sure it's lying around somewhere. I'll look it out for you. Just one last question. It's actually going to tax your brain a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Don't worry, don't need to panic yet. Right. For one night, you can have an extra singer in the band. Out of these three, who do you choose?
Okay.
Roger Daltrey from The Who, Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones, or Freddie Mercury from Queen?
It'd probably have to be Roger, I think. I love Freddie's voice, absolutely, and Mick is just an incredible performer. But I think Roger certainly he could still sing great.
Yeah.
But there were moments with Roger where he was transcendent, and Freddie's a different thing. Freddie was a showman, incredible voice, but it was in a particular mold. It's like quite poppy, and not really any deep understanding of the blues. And I think if we're going to talk, just stick to this current project, the music of Cream, I would say Roger Daltrey would be all right, because he has that thing. He's an incredible singer, incredible vocalist. That would be amazing. Funnily enough, I met Kenny Jones the other night, who used to be in The Who. He was doing he does a festival down at Hurtwood Polo Club once a year, and so I went down to say hello to him, and Donovan was performing. A friend of mine called Cleo Silvestra, who was very close to Brian Jones back in the early 60s. She actually went to school with my mum. She sang with Donovan, and I got to say hello to Kenny, so that's nice. So I'm one step closer to having Roger Daltrey in the band. Let's put it like that.
I've always...
If I keep him with Kenny, he might give me Roger's email and phone number, and then I can call him up and say, hey man, fancy coming along to a gig.
Yeah.
I've only got 5 million to give you. Sorry, I can't give you the 10. That sort of thing.
Roger Daltrey kind of strikes, because I have actually seen Roger Daltrey this year. I've not seen him singing, but I have seen him on a stage, because he was promoting what was it? Teenage Cancer Trust. It was...
Yes, he's very involved in that. It's great, yeah.
And I was just looking down at him, I'm like, wow. I was like, I actually wasn't expecting him to be there. I was like, I went down there to obviously show me support, but Roger Daltrey being there was an icing on the cake for me. Because The Who used to do some music for CSI when it was shown in America. That is what got me into The Who severely.
Yeah.
It was like, right, who's this? Look online. Oh, it's The Who.
No, I mean, Townsend is, obviously my dad wrote a lot of songs for Cream and hundreds of songs subsequent to that, and, I have absolute respect for him and love for what he did and admiration. But, I think Townsend is up there, in terms of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century. I count my dad as one of them, by the way, but I think Townsend had something very good, and yes, you listen back to all those songs. It's incredible music, incredible rock music, and Keith Moon, just introduced that very kind of unconventional drumming into the band, and Entwistle, what an amazing bass player that was involved heavily in producing a lot of stuff in the studio, and it's you can't knock it.
Definitely
not too bad. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. One thing I'll never do is diss The Who, just because I love their music so much. I really do. I can't fault it. Really
it's
can't.
Brilliant, and there's a very particular thing about it. I think with Cream, with the original Cream, you know, my dad sang a lot of the songs live and played the bass, and that was a very unique proposition that you had a singing bass player and a guitarist and a drummer. But with the Who, it's very much what we call rock music became. You know, you have the singer just singing, you know, so it's like Robert Plant or whatever, you know, and the guitarist is the guitarist and the bass player is the bass player, and you know, like Queen, you know, as we mentioned Freddie Mercury, you know, there's a particular thing that emerged subsequent to Cream that has a particular flavour to it, and I you know, yeah, you can't fault it. It's incredible, and you know, also their longevity. You mentioned about 50 years or whatever. They've got to be around for almost 60 years or something, or at least 55, or you know, and the dynamic between all of them, and you know, obviously now Ringo's son Zach Starkey's been in the band for a while, and he's an awesome musician. And Pino Palladino was playing at one point, playing the bass. I'm not sure if he still is, but he's obviously another very iconic guy. You know, played on all the Paul Young stuff back in the 80s and countless other records. So, you know, they've made the right choices, and you know, and Pete Townsend has carried on with a fresh perspective on himself as a writer. You know, he's carried on. You know, he didn't rest on his laurels, as it were, and a lot of musicians from that time did. They slowed down. The ideas stopped coming, and you know, however, Pete, I don't know Pete. I know some people that do. But you know, whatever he's doing and however he's doing it, he's got something right in that sense of just keeping on moving on. You know, and I have total respect for that.
Yeah, watching The Who, it doesn't matter where it is on my bucket list. So hopefully before we retire, I will actually get to see them.
Yeah, well, you know, hopefully they'll keep going for a little while longer. You know, I think they were bringing out a new record. I don't know whether it's been released yet. Haven't heard it, but I did see an interview with them recently with Daltrey talking about the fact that they've made a new record and that he thinks it's the best record they've made in decades. So I look forward to checking that out.
So me especially.
Excellent.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, and hopefully we get to sit in this. We get to be in this situation again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk to you again about other stuff that I'm up to. That'd be brilliant.
Yep. All right, you take care and enjoy your tour.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Take care of yourself.
Cheers.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.